Hi, everyone. Welcome to this session. My name is Jose. I'm a physician scientist trainee at MSU. I'm a seventh year here in the DO PhD program, and I'm currently the president of APSA. I just want to give a shout out to my co-hosts who are members of the APSA executive committee if they want to introduce themselves, Bree and Michael.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Bree Christophers, pronoun she. I am a fourth year MD PhD student at the Tri-Institutional MD PhD program. I serve as the chair of the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee of APSA.
Hi, everybody. My name is Michael. I'm a sixth year MD PhD student at Pitt and Carnegie Mellon, and I am a member of the JEDI Committee and co-chair of the Virtual Content Committee at APSA.
Awesome. So I'm just going to just give a quick brief introduction for each of our panelists. And then Dr. Satlin's going to give us a presentation or an overview of opportunities for pediatrician scientists during residency. And then we'll open it up generally for questions. So Dr. Satlin, MD, is the Herbert and Lehman Professor of Pediatrics and chair of the Department of Pediatrics at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, and she's also the pediatrician-in-chief at Mount Sinai Kravis Children's Hospital. And so she has multiple accomplishments, including being an NIH-funded investigator looking at and nephrologist. And recently, she's the chair of the research committee of the Association of Medical School Pediatric Department Chairs. And so we're excited to partner with her. She's also a recent member of the board of directors for the American Physician-Scientists Association. So thank you for your service in that capacity too. We also have Dr. Stephanie Davis on, MD. She's the Charles Everett and Catherine Brewer Professor and Chair of the Department of Pediatrics at UNC and Physician-in-Chief at North Carolina Children's Hospital. And she's a pulmonologist who studies diseases such as cystic fibrosis, primary ciliary dyskinesia, and lung disease of prematurity. And she previously served as president of the Society of Pediatric Research. We have Dr. Daniel Moore, MD, PhD. He's an assistant professor of pediatrics, pathology, microbiology, and immunology at Vanderbilt, and he's the director of the Vanderbilt's Pediatric Physician Scientist Training Program. And then we have Dr. Will Parsons, MD, PhD. He's the Sidney L. Donald Faust Chair of Pediatric Cancer Precision Medicine at Texas Children's, and he's the Deputy Director for Texas Children's Cancer Hematology Center, and he's an Associate Professor in the Department of Pediatrics in the section of HEMONC, and also co-directs the Pediatrician-Scientist Training Program. And then, of course, we have Audrey Ness. She's an MD PhD she has her MD PhD. She trained at Virginia Commonwealth University School of Medicine, and her PhD is in clinical and translational research. And she's a pediatric resident at Baylor College of Medicine, and she served as the past president of APSA. So really excited to see you, Audrey. So I'll hand it over to Dr. Satlin to give our presentation, and then we'll open it up broadly for questions.
Great, thank you so much. Hold on one second, let me. Okay, thanks so much for allowing me to share with you, a summary of training opportunities during residency for research-focused MD PhDs and MDs as well. This is a lengthy presentation with a lot of information at the end. I'm not going to go over, all the details, but I'll make this slide set available to APSA. I have permission from all those who contributed so that you can actually read the details at your leisure. So, I don't think I have to tell this group that, the goal of all of the physician scientist training programs is to develop the next generation of pediatric physician scientists. This is an awesome career. I think you'll be able to hear from, the panelists, how rewarding this career trajectory is. When you start to look for residency programs, there are actually a lot of pediatric physician scientist training programs. I'm not going to go over the details, but there is a listing. You can actually access the listing of research residencies at this site here that was put together by the Society for Pediatric Research. I don't know when it was last updated, but nonetheless, I looked through it and, many of the research residencies seem to be, updated. But the reason I'm not going to go through every one of them is that the program elements differ depending on the program. They all include mentorship by scientists, physician scientists, and physicians, personalized scholarship oversight committees, different workshops, courses, and seminars on career development and scientific concepts. Many of the programs include small grant funding for research, and they offer the opportunity to complete the American Board of Pediatrics residency training pathways, the alternate pathways, which we're going to go over now, the IRP and ARP. So I want to spend a few minutes just, talking about these. Again, the American Board of Pediatrics has approved these non-standard pathways for training in pediatrics. As you all probably know, the typical pediatric specialist training is 3 years of residency and 3 years of fellowship, two of the years of fellowship are typically devoted to research. But again, the ABP recognized that they had to streamline and foster physician scientist training while again ensuring clinical competency. So 2 pathways were developed specifically committed to training physician scientists, and these include the integrated research pathway and the accelerated research pathway. Notably, these are not fast tracking pathways, these 2. They don't reduce the overall length of training time, but what they do is provide additional time devoted to research. And they do differ in terms of the content of the pediatrics training, the length of general pediatrics versus fellowship training, and the time of eligibility for certifying exams. I would encourage all of you to review the American Board of Pediatrics website for detailed guidelines for these pathways. I have to tell you that, again, in speaking with the ABP just last week, they actually asked that I change this slide to include that these are the ABP alternate research pathways available as of March 2022, because there very likely will be a change that happens sometime, in the future, and you should again always check for what's the most up-to-date pathways. So these 2 pathways are summarized here. I have a lot of slides at the end that you are again welcome to look at your leisure, but that go into more detailed analysis of the pathways. But just to summarize, the accelerated research pathway includes 2 years of general pediatrics, then subspecialty training. The fellowship is 4 years in duration. There are specific rotations in residency. By the way, you do not need American Board of Pediatrics approval for this pathway, but that should you elect to pursue this pathway, the ABP the American Board of Pediatrics has to be notified before the end of the first postgraduate year. The eligibility for the general pediatrics exam is after 2 years of general pediatrics and the required subspecialty clinical time. Again, I go into details in later slides, but basically you have to do more clinical time, but it's during your subspecialty training. The integrated research pathway is comprised of 3 years of general pediatrics, then subspecialty training. And the fellowship, the subspecialty fellowship, is 3 years. So it's 1 year less than the accelerated pathway. There are specific eligibility criteria, and one would need to get approval from the American Board of Pediatrics before you pursue this pathway. You can petition to enter this pathway either before you start or by the end of PGY 1 year. And the eligibility for the general pediatrics exam is after 3 years of general peds and any required, subspecialty clinical time. Where did I put this? I'm sorry. I'm going to rush ahead here. I just want to show you what these pathways look like. And I should have moved this diagram up. This is a slide that I actually downloaded from Duke, but it's kind of nice because it goes through what the categorical pathway looks like in terms of PGY 1, 2, 3, and then PGY 4 is fellowship year. Again, this is the categorical pathway. The integrated research pathway, you can see, has research that's built in to PGY 2 year and PGY 3 year. With this, though, you have to do some additional clinical time during fellowship to be eligible for the boards. So I'll come back to this slide in a minute. But in addition to these two pathways, there is a subspecialty fast track pathway, and it allows fellows, so people who have actually completed their Gen Peds training, these individuals who've demonstrated an accomplishment in research can apply for a 1-year waiver of training. And it's specifically the scholarly requirement during fellowship that reduces the overall time in training and residency and fellowship from 6 to 5 years. So one would do 3 years of residency and 2 years of fellowship. And that one of those years of fellowship does have to include 1 year of broad-based clinical training. Again, the evidence of research accomplishment would include a PhD. So all of you on this call would be presumably eligible for this. And the subspecialty, the fellowship program director has to petition the American Board of Pediatrics Subboard either before or during the first year of training to waive the requirement. And notably, trainees who enter subspecialty training via the accelerated research pathway are not eligible for fast tracking. So, as you think about these non-standard pathways, what you just have to take into, consideration is the time in training, your research focus and the pace of discovery in the research field, and then the balance of clinical and research time within your subspecialty field. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about that, during the panel discussion. Very exciting was the rollout of the NIH R38 program. This is a program, it's called the STAR program for stimulating access to research and residency. The purpose of these programs were to recruit and retain outstanding postdoc health professionals who have demonstrated potential and an interest in pursuing careers as clinician investigators. And another purpose was to accelerate the transition of residents to subsequent research and career development support. This is the STAR grants are given not to individuals, but to institutions that provide outstanding mentored research opportunities that are designed for these resident investigators. The resident investigators are able to engage in research projects with experienced investigators for a minimum of 1 contiguous year and a maximum of 2 years. Not every NIH institute, though, participates in the STAR program. Right now, there are 4, the NHLBI, NCI, NIAID, and NIA. let's see, why is this not going? There we go. And in terms of support for the resident investigators, they get 80% of their PGY salary for a minimum of one contiguous year and a maximum of 2. Programs are limited to 4 resident investigators per year and have to have a minimum of 2. There are a lot of other supplementary research and professional development activities. They're listed here. Oops, they are listed here. The resident investigators can get research supplies with some caveats of technical support, registration and materials for short-term courses, and workshops that provide research skills, participation in workshops on oral and written communication of research and grant writing, travel to scientific conferences and NIH-sponsored workshops, and support for skill building needed for research supervision and mentoring. Again, I don't want to go through all these slides. These are really informational for you, but these are, elements of the research and residency program, the STAR program, that are, listed here. And again, you should, as you're thinking about, where to go next, you should, ask about the possibility of joining one of these programs. Again, this diagram also indicates, how the research is divided up. Basically, all these programs need you to be focused on your clinical activities in year 1, and in PGY 2 and 3, one is able to participate more in research. I'm going to put in one last plug now for, what lies beyond. And, the Pediatric Scientist Development Program is a national program that is just a fabulous program. I've been involved as a mentor, and I actually chaired the evaluation committee for this program for many years. The program is run now by Sally Permar, who's at the chair at Cornell. Again, the goal is the same as, we all want. We want to develop this next generation of pediatrician scientists. This program, it's a national program between NICHD, the National Institute of Child Health and Development, and the Association of Medical School Pediatric Department Chairs, AMSPDEC. The program is in year 38, and the renewal that is to be submitted will be for years 39 to 43. So it's been around for a long time. The goals are, again, address problems central to child health, try to increase the number of pediatric physicians who go on to become independent scientists. The program is designed to provide 3 years of mentored research training with 80 to 100% protected time, really significant protected time. And the program, as when thinking about this in the future, they are looking for scholars from multiple disciplines, backgrounds, and academic institutions. Candidates must be completing or have completed a pediatric residency. So again, this is a step after your pediatric residency. And they're looking for pediatricians with an MD, DO, or MD, PhD degree who are committed to a career in academic medicine. The outcomes in terms of securing funding are exceptional for this group of trainees. These are data from 221 PSDPs in terms of how many have gone on to get NIH funding. 51%, 35% have gone on to get K awards. The K to R award conversion rate is very high. This is K to multiple R's versus K to R01, but still exceptional. It's a great program. So in any case, there are a couple of groups that specifically fund slots. The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, of course, it's NICHD supported. and the National CMV Foundation. So if your research, lies in any of these areas, or doesn't, I mean, any pediatric research, consider where to go with this, that this is a possibility for you. So if you have questions, you should contact Sally. She said, please encourage all of you to contact her if you have questions about this program. Again, this is for the future. So I'm going to stop here, but for those of you, because I will make this slide set available, there's a lot more information about the alternative pathways that follows. But I'll stop here and turn it back to Jose.
Thanks so much. I'm going to attempt to pin our panelists. I just wanted to give everyone an opportunity that hasn't spoken yet on our panel to just say hi. And if you want to add anything that I didn't mention about your career, we'll do that first. And then I'll turn it over to Michael and Bree to do the question session. So if any one of our panelists want to just chime in and add anything to that presentation or about your career.
Yeah, Jose, I just wanted to add about the PSDP, the program that Dr. Satlin just presented. I'm very involved in that as well, and it really is a great program to get involved in. You apply typically at your third year residency, or depending on what pathway you've gone through. And if you also want to say, I'm very involved in the American Board of Pediatrics. So if you have any questions about those pathways, because it can be a little bit confusing, which is why the slide set will be helpful, please feel free to reach out to myself as well. But I will just put a plug in. I'm so glad all of you are interested in pediatric research. It has really been such a phenomenal way to promote child health, help children, and just has been fantastic all along. And I'm an MD only. So, and I decided to do research later, and I've loved it. So.
Thanks so much for that. I've pinned everyone. I think it just is on my screen, but just a recommendation to you can pin our panelists, and that might be an easier way to look at the meeting. The idea of doing a meeting instead of a webinar was to be a little bit more interactive. So I'll hand it over to Bree and Michael. You can, we have some prepared questions, and then when folks are wanting to ask a question, you can raise your hand or just unmute or post it in the chat if you're more comfortable, and we'll read it for you.
I'm Dan Moore. I was going to ping in too, just to get my few seconds. I'm the PhD director at Vanderbilt. I'm also the endocrine fellowship director, so I can answer sort of questions from both sides. And I even personally did the IRP back in the day, so I can answer perspective questions about that too.
All right. So I'm going to start off with a question that was submitted during the registration process. The question has to do with how to make sure you have protected research time and balancing, making progress with your research while also making sure you can train as the best future pediatrician as you can be.
I can start. I was looking if that's okay. There's different stages of when you'll be doing your research. So I would say, first of all, really looking at when you're interviewing for your residency is really understanding the pathways that are offered at the department that you're interviewing with. Not all departments have residency pathways. That's why that link that Dr. Satlin had on there highlights a lot of those and where they're available. So that's the first thing I would say. And based on understanding that pathway, you're going to have a better understanding of how much protected research time that you'll have. The second thing is making sure that whatever your interests are, that there are mentors at that program who will make sure that you have that protected time and can help with your research along the way to launch you into your, many of you will likely do a specialty fellowship to help launch you into that. And I would say that's extremely important as well. And finally, when you're interviewing for residency, often they have time with the residents. And so if they have a protected research track there, talk to those residents. Ask them how much time they have in protected. How has the mentorship worked? And what has been the success of the residents that have been along that track into going into research and into a fellowship program? So those are just a few things. I could keep going. I'm sure Dan, Will, and Lisa have many things they can say too.
Well,
I think
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that's just, it's really important definitely to ask what it's meant by the time. Everybody throws around percentages like 80%, 20%, but that can mean very different things at different locations. 80%, 20% can mean a half day of clinic, it can mean a whole day of clinic, it could mean some call weeks. And then you have to kind of dig into the deeper. I think Stephanie's point to really talk to people who are doing it is really helpful, right? Because you could be 80% protected, but you could be on backup coverage like for 2 weeks out of the month. And it sounds totally innocuous, and I don't think anyone means any harm by it. But if you're on backup coverage, you can't really spend $10,000 on an experiment tomorrow because you might get called in for backup coverage. And sometimes residencies don't really understand that at first until you kind of explain it to them. And sometimes that's the value in PSTPs, is having sort of longitudinal, like, institutional knowledge that can remind people that, like, oh, that's just not a good idea. And pediatricians are very accommodating and they kind of get along with what they know, but that's some of the helpfulness in having that around. So definitely want to clarify. And I would recommend you clarify not just as your resident, but what happens to fellows in the fellowship you're interested in, because you're probably going to stay at that program. And then what happens to junior faculty? Like, what is the institution's commitment to research protection broadly, not just within the residency, but overall, because that gives you a good message on what they're all about.
Yeah, I think that highlighted a lot of the key points. I mean, it's really, it highlights the challenge of kind of this issue of how to balance and protect your time, which is like one of them. It's complex for everybody. It's especially complex for someone who's trying to become a physician scientist, right? Because you have all these different roles and you're trying to manage them in your training and then also in your career. So it's really different questions almost at each stage, right? At the residency stage, it's like, which of these types of programs are you going to be in? What type of time is there for research? I mean, it's relatively limited. You know, it's kind of the structure of the program. Then the fellowship stage, it starts to get into, I think, what Dr. Davis was highlighting in the beginning of institutional commitment and mentors who are available to work with you on what you want to do, right? If it's a place where the leadership is invested in it and is excited about having people do research and supporting that, that's wonderful. But you need people who specifically will match up with kind of your areas of interest, right? There can be really excellent institutions, but they might not have someone who's specifically, you know, a faculty member focusing on the type of thing that you want to do. So you just have to assess it out a little bit.
And speaking from the perspective of someone who's very freshly through the interview process and just really starting out on this residency pathway, as both Dr. Moore and Dr. Parsons touched on, I think as you're going through the interview process, really asking people what the culture is like at the institution is important. So I think asking these broad questions sometimes can be a little bit difficult to really get a sense of what it's like. And especially now that we're doing more things virtually, it can maybe be a bit more challenging. But like, for example, today I actually had a meeting with one of my mentors for a case report I'm working on, and my team was more than happy to cover for me for 30 minutes to go and have a meeting. And when I tell them that I'm in this research track, they know what that means and they're supportive of that. And they're aware of, other tracks that we have here at our institution. So those sorts of things can be a good indicator for the robustness of the research culture as a whole.
There's also one other note that I heard in there, like the question, like, what about being the best pediatrician I can be? And this is one that will really get you, right? Because you want to be the best pediatrician scientist you can be, which actually is a whole different career development than being the best pediatrician. You want to be a very good pediatrician, but if you're going to become a pediatric endocrinologist, you might not need 17 extra NICU shifts to help you get really good at putting lines in. Like, I'm not going to put in any lines as a pediatric endocrinologist. It was really fun to do it, but you're going to face these trade-offs. Like, you have a limited amount of time, and you probably cannot do everything, as many times as you would if you're also going to be a scientist with that protected time. And that's okay, right? You have to make sure that you're working with your team and your residency advisors and even the fellowship directors, make sure you're ready for that particular fellowship, but you don't have to be ready for all fellowships like a general pediatrician might be or might expect themselves to be. So your expectations for you may be different than your clinical colleague next door. And sometimes it's kind of hard as a resident. A lot of our scientist residents want to do another shift or another clinic or another this rather than, like go be in the lab. That's where you're supposed to be training. So that can be a hard piece for it early on.
I was going to say, I agree with what everybody said, about the culture at the institution. I do, if you look at the list of the research residencies, you will see that, these are, the chairs are typically, physician scientists or have had, are either, currently funded or have, been through this training pathway. It's really important for the leadership to understand what it takes to and how much support is necessary to actually transition from an MSTP on to a junior faculty who's transitioning to an R award from a K award. It's a long period of time. A lot of support is necessary. And you need to have, leadership that totally understands this and will support you.
Okay, so moving along, one of the questions that we got pre-registration was from somebody who asked about the kind of the pros and cons of the traditional categorical residency versus the research track residency, but also differences in the actual application process between those two, categorical and research. And I see that somebody kind of added in the chat something similar to the vein of that question, like what sort of applicant characteristics kind of stand out in the two different pathways. So maybe if we could tackle, kind of the differences in the application process between the two.
I can, Lacey, do you want to start?
Oh, Stephanie, why don't you go ahead? I was going to actually just open up, I'll reopen what the presentation or the more detailed information, which I didn't share with everybody, but it's in the slide set, which I already sent to Jose.
Great. So every program is slightly different. We actually have a separate pathway that you apply for when you're a fourth-year medical student here at UNC. Now, other places do it a little bit different. For the accelerated research pathway, like Lisa showed, you don't have to actually decide that until you're already in residency. And those are typically the MD PhDs that would be doing that. So this group, but we have a separate. So we have 2 slots of all of our slots specific for medical students who are interested in doing a residency pathway. And then the second question was, what do you look for? Well, we typically look for people, definitely MD PhDs who have been doing research. We know they're interested in research, but certainly other types of students who may not have their PhD, but who have participated in research that have a specific focus that they're interested in going into. We have a separate day that we interview those medical students. And we also have them meet the head of our program, Ian Davis, who's an oncologist here. And they interview, I spend a little bit more time with them because it's a smaller group than our large group, several hundred people who interview, not at the same time, but throughout the 3 months. And then, and then we hook them in with interviews with other physician scientists or other scientists specific to the area that they're interested in, because whether it be cancer, pulmonary, food allergy, whatever it is. And I think a lot of programs do that similar. I was at Riley, and that was very similar to how we did it at Riley as well. So it's a little bit different, but we're really looking for people who have what I call that fire in their belly. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but they're just very passionate about research, and if they've had some background of doing that.
Yeah, that's the same term we talk about here as well. I mean, we have, as opposed to our categorical program where we have whatever 1,000 people apply, for the pediatrician-scientist track, we'll have, I don't even know, maybe on the order of 25, US-based MD PhDs apply or something like that. And so we can more or less interview or offer the option to interview them all. But basically they go through our categorical residency interviewing just in the same way everyone else does. And then we have an extra day where we do kind of similar stuff to what Dr. Davis talked about.
We're very much the same also, but probably we all get the same candidates, right? So we're all sort of geographically similar. There's the limited number of candidates. The fire in the belly is a very chair term. I think no chair in the U.S. says anything other than that. I think that's really important too. But also kind of thinking like, what is this candidate's story? Like, why are they here now? What did they experience, and how are they integrating that into what they want to do going forward? And that to me has been the most telling indicator that they've learned from things, that they have a plan. And it might be they don't want to do the thing that they were doing before, but they learned from like what they were doing before and can tell you a story about how they're going to integrate that to move forward, to really show their creativity and their understanding. And they might not have done very much research at all, they may be the MD only candidates, but they had experiences, they learned from them, and they can tell you why. And then the candidates I don't like as well, like had some experiences, were even very productive, but are sort of like, well, I'll figure it out when I get there. And like they don't have a plan of like how they're going to figure it out when they get there. What are you going to learn from your rotations? What questions are you going to ask? Like specifically, how can I help you succeed here? But the more you can integrate with that, for me as an interviewer, the more I can see like how you get from where you are sitting in front of me to like 5-10 years down the road being really successful, and whether or not you're going to mesh with the resources that I have here. So I certainly don't want to bring you in if I don't have the things to support you. When we have a lot of cool stuff to support you here, so we usually find a way for most people, but you want to make sure that it's a really good fit, especially for the candidate has a really clear vision or an understanding of how they're going to clarify their vision.
And I'll just add also what gets me so excited when and first of all, our interview process at Sinai is identical essentially to what you've heard. We candidates interview for the categorical program, but we also have a day that's set aside for research interviews. And we have the research resident candidates actually meet with basic science faculty if this is the area they want to go in. What I was going to say, what gets me very excited is when I meet an applicant who says, well, I'm applying to this program because I want to work with so-and-so who's a member of, Mount Sinai's faculty. We've had because then, there's going to be a great match, and, their progress can be made even as, during internship and residency.
I'll just add again, as someone who fairly recently went through this process, that, everyone was talking about their interview process and meeting various physician scientists. Enjoy it. Like, it's a really awesome experience to network and meet people and really get excited envisioning what your potential future could be like. And going back to kind of what Dr. Moore said about having a vision, I personally, when I was applying, didn't have everything completely figured out. And I don't think the expectation, again, I'm not a program director, but the expectation of anyone is for you to have everything perfectly lined up, but really being thoughtful about your prior experiences, how that shaped you, how that's building you into a pediatrician scientist, and that enthusiasm and passion going forward. And that's what also I think carries through as you're looking through different potential research mentors and meeting all these people. So definitely get excited about it. Definitely enjoy the process of, exploring all these opportunities.
Hi, sorry, could I just ask a clarifying question real quick? So you mentioned that there's sort of like separate days set aside to meet with physician scientists and for the residents who are hoping to go through this pathway. Is that like one day later, sort of like how second looks work? Or is this, you have multiple special physician scientist research interview days, like throughout the interview season?
The latter.
Sorry, go ahead. Different places probably do it differently. In the world where we're actually getting to see people in person, we just had a couple of days where we would bring in all of our PSP applicants and they do their categorical residency interviews like the days before, and then we would just tack on a day or whatever to make it like that. We kind of did the same virtually, but it didn't need to be temporarily connected because folks could do the one at one point and the other at another point.
We do the same the day before.
And we have them scattered throughout, so I think it's all.
Yeah, we only have a few research resident days though.
Exactly.
I mean, the virtual world is a great option for all of y'all, though. Like, what I tell everybody when they meet with us, like, if you want more information, like, come get it. Like, if you need another meeting or you learn something along the way, or if you learn something about yourself through the interview process, as Audra was kind of alluding to, like, come back and ask again. I think we'd all be open, especially with the virtual thing. You just tack on another meeting, and there's probably no one on this call or even that you'll meet in the process that wouldn't be willing to do that for you if that helped you make your decision. And even if it helped you make your decision to go somewhere else, like, that would be okay.
For sure. I feel like it really is such a learning experience in itself, just meeting different people and also just meeting, like was mentioned earlier, residents in the programs, and then just, yeah, also meeting scientists. Like some of these scientists that you'll get to meet are, people whose papers you've read, and you're actually getting to meet them in person, which is really cool. Especially in an era where, we haven't had as many conferences recently.
Should we go to some of the questions in the chat, or do you guys have other questions that you'd like to talk about?
Sure. One of the questions in the chat was, is it more difficult to do translational research given like children's protected status?
It can be, for sure. I'm a clinical translational researcher, and often you will find that the biomarker work can be a little more challenging. So, for example, I do work in young children with cystic fibrosis or primary ciliary dyskinesia. They can't do spirometry, so we did special lung function testing in them, or they don't necessarily cough up sputum. So yes, it can be, but I do think that intervening early and understanding disease early can ultimately change trajectory of lifetime disease. And so that's why I think it's so important to do research in children. So it definitely can be challenging, but it is done a lot. That's the thing you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, in the pediatric cancer world, I mean, there's obviously, we have the challenge like for other diseases that as compared to our adult colleagues, we have far fewer numbers of patients. So if we're trying to do, a study of a specific cohort or a specific type of patient, it can be much more challenging, which is why we do a lot of collaborative research across the country. But the upside is our our parents and our families are incredibly motivated to participate in research. And so if we do have an idea or a trial, then it's amazing the kind of buy-in that we get from our families as they partner on them. So other than the numbers kind of crunch, which is just a fact of like math and life and power calculations and such, it's really, we can be pretty successful at it.
Would it be all right for me to just ask a question here? Okay, perfect. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to just wait for the chat or, so I had a couple of questions, and thank you all for your insights. I'm Freddie Damon, so I'm a third year in the MD PhD program at IU. And so a couple of things that I've heard that I just kind of like your guys' insight on. Applying for like PSTP programs, is there an expectation that your trainees will eventually become faculty at the university? Is that a pretty common thing to happen, or is it really just the training?
I can start and just say that when we identify, again, it's the research residencies are competitive, and when we bring somebody in and we invest, in them at the residency stage, my hope is always that they're going to stay on. And this is a pipeline program. I started the research residency. I used to be the director of the MSTP at Sinai. When I was appointed chair, my goal was to, continue training physician scientists, this time in peds. But the goal was always to actually start in medical school, with hopefully MSTP training, and continue supporting these individuals until they metamorphose into an independently funded investigator. So we've been able to keep on, through residency, fellowship, junior faculty. We've been able to, continue to support these individuals, because I do want them to be part of the faculty, our faculty, with the investment in their success.
Yeah, I would just absolutely echo what Dr. Satlin said. It's the same. It is, and I was going to use the word pipeline. This is where we're building our pipeline for our pediatric physician scientists who are on our faculty. So 100%.
Actually, it's really important for you as candidates, right? You really want a program with that perspective. I mean, you also want a program that if you decide you need to move in a few years, they're going to fight like heck for you to go wherever you want to go. But if a program's like, oh, you're going to be a resident, and then we'll see if you can stay on as a fellow, we're really not that sure, and they make you feel unsure, then as a resident, you can't take on a very big project, right? You got to kind of get something done, so you might have to move for fellowship. And if you're a fellow and they're giving you the message like, yeah, we're not really that confident in you, like, let's see what you can do, let's prove yourself, and then we'll maybe take you on to faculty. Obviously, we're always all proving ourselves, but then you got to take on a project that you have to complete during fellowship, rather than like thinking about the whole thing as part of your career, right? You're thinking 3 years at a time rather than 10 years at a time. And the amount of things you can do, especially if you're already familiar with the PhD game, in 3 years is a lot different than if you're having a long time horizon where you're going to be here, you're going to be supported. It's a whole different thought process as to what you're setting up and taking on. Obviously, there are risks and whatever along the way, but you really want to feel that from the program, that they would really like for you to be here, so that when you take on that big project, that you're going to get a chance to make it meaningful.
And I think one thing that Will had said earlier is that, you have to, or somebody said this, that, the program has to make sure that you, as a research resident and potentially a future faculty member, a fellow in between, would be a good fit. So, that's something that we really take into consideration is, a research resident's interest, if they have, a well-developed research interest. I mean, Audrey, you said, you may not know exactly what you want to do, but if their interests overall can be accommodated and well mentored in, our institution, well, then we consider that, person a good fit. But if, somebody's doing research that really we have no expertise in, it would be a disservice for me to even accept them into a research residency.
So I saw somebody had their hand raised before. I didn't know if they wanted to unmute themselves, unless it was an accident. Oh, there we go.
That was me. I just have a quick question. I'm Cora Miracle. I'm a fourth year at Marshall University's MD PhD program, and I'm really interested in med peds because I kind of want to really follow the peds all the way into their adulthood. It's something that I saw in my mentorship. How would that look for somebody who's applying to residency and there's not as many med peds research residencies as there are just pediatrics? So if you could give me some insight on that, that would be great.
We do that here to a degree. It is more complicated, right? Because there's really no way to, there's 4 years of med peds and it's already shrunk to be the 4 years. So there's no place to put the research inside the residency. So you're asking for research and residency programs. That inherently means an extension of the program. So our R38 at Vanderbilt allows med peds to come in and do that, but that of course would extend your time. And then fellowships also do med peds. So in my capacity as the endocrine fellowship director, we've had a couple of different med peds fellows. And again, that takes an extra year on top of the training. So you have 2 clinical years to complete now. So say if you want to be a med peds endocrinologist, great choice. It's 8 years after graduation from your MD PhD program to complete the bare requirements for both programs. But can you become a physician scientist in it? Absolutely. If I were your director, I would poke you on that. Like I would push you pretty hard on that. That like you're going to spend 80+% of your time doing research. If that is what you envision as a pediatrician scientist, and only spend 20% of your time across these 2 different specialties. Like, is that the most important way to address this, or could you address it by being a pediatrician that sees kids into their mid-20s? Could you address it by being an adult medicine doctor that starts seeing people a little bit earlier? There are definitely great examples of people that have very specific problems like developmental cardiology problems that they really are getting research mileage out of by seeing them in adulthood and understanding the long-term genetic follow-up. But MD PhDs are also terrible decision makers. You already decided to do 2 degrees because you couldn't decide to do 1. And like 82% of MD PhDs think they should do med peds at some point in their application process before they eventually consider settling on one or the other. So you just think about your story and whether or not it's the most important way to make the impact you want to make. And it very well may be for you, but that would poke.
Yeah, I'd say the same. I think there has to be a really specific reason to want to do anything. I mean, that's the generalizable like comment, right? Is your time is the most valuable thing. You've spent a lot of time doing the MD PhD. You've spent a lot of time doing probably some other research maybe before the MD PhD. You're going to be doing this for another 10 years. We tend to be in this line of business, tend to be the type of personality that can get excited about learning a lot of different things, taking on a lot of different educational opportunities, but there's only so much time. So at some point, and this is the time, I think you need to start being more strategic about, well, what am I going to do? And what are the costs and benefits of me spending this additional training or time on it? It's tough because we all get excited about stuff though.
Thank you so much.
Another question that I kind of had along the same, so as a 3rd year looking to apply this fall, I know for a lot of specialties, way rotations are kind of a big consideration, and at least from what I've been told, it's to kind of show the programs your clinical acumen and for a large application pool to kind of show yourself off. Because we are a smaller applicant pool, and I guess we would have some of our PhD publications and such to show it off. Do you have a way is there any benefit to doing an away rotation at a university for someone interested in like a research program?
Oh, we don't care at all. Not for me. I don't know if others feel differently.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It would, right. I completely concur. I would say though, it may help you if you go. I mean, that would be more for you to sort out if that program has what you want. But it doesn't make a difference in terms of when we're looking at residents at all.
Yeah, you could always, one thing that I did when I was at your stage was just reach out to various programs and just talk to people. You can always do that as well. You know, you may not do a full clinical rotation and physically be there, but, you know, reaching out to program directors, reaching out and asking if you can talk with some of the trainees, and, you know, start looking into various programs and places and asking questions about what it's like there. You know, like networking, not necessarily doing like a full clinical rotation.
What I used to do when I was the MSTP director is I would actually, you know, I knew where previous MSTPs, you know, had gone. If they had gone to a program that, you know, one of our current trainees was interested in applying to, and I would, you know, introduce them, because again, and I would encourage all of you to do that, you know, talk to your MSTP directors. If you're interested in a specific program, they will know, they can give you a lot of advice, you know, about who's been there, who's been successful, what the, you know, issues may be.
That is very helpful. It has been a very big question in my head, so that definitely sorts some things out. And the last question I had, if it's all right, is, you know, I've been told a lot this year, pediatricians tend to make a lot less than their internal medicine counterparts. In the research world, I mean, I guess personally I'm interested in peds cardiology. I know that the adult cardiology world has tons more money than the pediatric cardiology world does. In general, is it a limitation in terms of like finding research funding? You know, as we get further along into our careers, is there just less funding for pediatrics research, or is that mainly like a clinical compensation issue?
There are a lot of opportunities to get funding as a pediatric physician scientist. And I will also say that in the end, what drives you and what you're passionate about is what's going to make you, for most people, not everyone, but for most people, is what makes them excited about getting up and going to work every day. But there are many, and in peds cardiology, good gracious, do we need physician scientists who want to do pediatric cardiology? So I think that's great. And you have some great people at Riley who you can talk to, because I heard you're from IU, that can help guide you with that. You know, there's certainly NIH funding, there's foundation funding, there's all kinds, and a lot of programs have these internal pay opportunities as well, that you can get involved in, or through their children's foundations. So there's quite a bit of opportunity. I'm not saying it's not competitive to get the funding, but I'm saying there is definitely a lot of opportunity. The difference in the salaries have nothing to do with the research funding. It just has to do with more of the clinical compensation.
Makes you cheaper to put on grants, though. More grants for you. That's a little cynical, but you know, it's a little funny.
Yeah, there's a lot less pediatric research money. There's also a lot fewer pediatric researchers. So we complain all the time that only X% of NIH funding goes to pediatric cancer research. But on the other hand, we've always had funding to do cool projects that we're excited about doing. So I don't know, it works out.
And certainly I'm funded through NIDDK, and they are agnostic, you know, as to whether I'm a pediatrician or what. You know, there are very few pediatric nephrologists who do research, but you know, it's, you know, my chances, I feel very confident that my chances of getting funded would be the same as somebody with similar qualifications in medicine, for example.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that we've touched on most of the questions in the chat, which I think we have covered most of them, focusing on like differences between categorical and research residencies. But the one last question here that was of a slightly different flavor, but may be important, especially for MD PhDs who could perhaps be deciding on pediatrics, you know, after their PhD. And that question is it necessary to have worked specifically in pediatrics research before applying to residency in order to demonstrate commitment to a career as a pediatrician scientist?
No,
Absolutely
not
not.
at all.
We like people with cool stories who are excited about
Right.
stuff. We're convinced want to be pediatricians. Beyond that, honestly, just about anything will do.
Exactly.
If you're in the pediatrics match, you're committed to pediatrics. At least that's generally what we probably believe. As Stephanie said earlier, all disease begins in childhood. So whatever you studied before, it's probably applicable to children. So we'd love to have it, right? I mean, in some ways, they kind of love having something that's not already overstudied in peds, right? Bringing something new to peds, bringing something interesting and new technology, new perspectives. Those are all great too. As long as it fits a narrative and a story of like, why do you want to bring it to peds? Like, tell a good story. But outside of that, it'd be awesome.
All right, thanks so much, everyone. I'll just leave just a quick second if there's any additional like burning questions that we didn't get to.
And Jose, I'm sure anybody can reach out to any of us with any questions that you have.
Yeah,
I'm speaking for all four of us, but I'm sure that's true.
I think that point even more broadly is true, that obviously this is a super specialized career pathway and you should feel comfortable reaching out to program directors, people at programs. I mean, it's a community of people who have kind of a common goal, and the vast majority of people you reach out to should be interested in talking to you. And if they're not, then that's frankly useful information as well. So please just seek out information. We're happy to talk to you.
And I mean, we're all in the game trying to recruit you to come to our programs, right? But I mean, it's a win for any of us individually when you become a pediatrician scientist anywhere, right? I mean, we all want more colleagues everywhere. We all want to meet you and have you distributed wherever it is you're going to go. I mean, I know some of you are still just peds curious, right? Coming to this meeting, you're not all necessarily in the match right now or next year. So we really hope that that will continue to be your pathway. And, you know, I would certainly I'd be happy to help you go match with Stephanie, right? Because then you would be a pediatrician scientist and that would be good for the universe. And we're all really committed to that.
Yeah, I guess the flip side of it is a very small world, like for better and worse in this area, right? So, you know, you'll be meeting the same people applying for fellowship, looking for faculty positions, which is great if you've, like Audra, I think is you know, a perfect example of someone who's taken full advantage of the process and meeting people and gets excited about stuff, right? And if we meet those people down the road, we get excited about it, even if they didn't come to our place. I mean, it's nice to see you all. We get excited about this. So thanks, everybody.
I'll just say residents are excited to meet you too. So don't hesitate to reach out to, you know, trainees as well. And you'll also find, on the note of small community, that when you're going through the application and interview season, you will see the same applicants over and over and over again. And those will be your future colleagues. And so that is also another good opportunity to kind of peer network.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. And thanks to our panelists for sharing their time and perspectives. We will share the recording as well as slides and transcripts and contact information for our panelists with everyone. Give us some time to do that. And stay engaged with APSA if you can. We have a lot of resources, and we have the joint meeting coming up in Chicago. And so if anyone's attending, I'll see you there.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, everyone.